This is the first time I've worn this shirt in public since the Nixon administration. But I did it to make a point that the elements in the story, like the shirt, just probably won't come together anymore. But they did it one time. When I was young, I was very idealistic and introspective, and I was searching for who I was and what I stood for, and spent a lot of time with that. Of course, today they've got an app for that. But in my mind, I had trouble reconciling this search with sitting in a classroom while all the world was changing with all sorts of social revolutions. And so I wound up dropping out of college, giving up my draft deferment, and leaving the green hills of South Carolina to go to New York City to find myself. And about a year later, I found myself on Whitehall Street at the induction station being drafted into the military. Now, the Army had also done some soul searching, and although they had a perfectly adequate basic training unit in Fort Dix, New Jersey, they had decided to come to the conclusion that young men from New York who were sent to New Jersey would be strongly tempted to go back home at every opportunity, so they put us all on buses and sent us down to South Carolina. I saw the irony in that. And was sent to a basic training company at Fort Jackson, which is near Columbia. Now, a company has about 175 people, more or less, broken down into platoons, and our company had a company street, which was about a block long, and on either side were oblong two-story buildings, a kind of a pale butterscotch color that had been constructed during the Second World War as temporary barracks, and now a quarter of a century later were still in use. And it was at that early stage when I made the biggest mistake of my military career. You see, we'd been filling out all kinds of forms, and sometimes we went to special rooms to fill out all kinds. And got to the last form, and at the bottom it said, "Is there anything else we should know about you?" And well, I had been doing this soul searching, and I had come to the conclusion that war was not a good thing, and that this particular war we had at the moment was particularly pointless, and that the logical extension from that, if you're a thinking and feeling person, is that you should live life as a pacifist. And I thought the Army ought to know that. Now, this is not a simple thing to do. Being a pacifist has many nuances and ramifications, and I hadn't worked through all of them. But I thought I was on my way, and so I wrote down, I said, I am a pacifist, and I thought they ought to know that. The Army took me aside, and they were nice. They said, we understand, but they informed me that pacifism, you see, is not a matter of conscience, and it is not a matter of morality. It's a matter of credentials. And I was raised in the wrong church, so I was not qualified to oppose war. So all I had accomplished by being so honest on the form and forthcoming was that I had a little red flag on my folder that said I was a troublemaker. My drill sergeant came up to me. He was a combat veteran from Vietnam, and he had taken offense at my declaration and came over to me. And by come over to me, I mean he got his face about an inch or so away from me. And he said he didn't like me, and he was going to drive me out of the Army. He was going to make me desert. And he didn't know two things. The first was that as an overweight nerd, I had grown up with my share of bullies, and I was not easily intimidated. I was standing there with my head shaved, wearing this puke green uniform, with the primary purpose of staying out of jail, and by God, I was going to do that. The second thing he wasn't aware of, and neither was I, was that during the first couple weeks of basic, we had 6 deserters from our company, which was more than any other unit in Fort Jackson, and 1 suicide. And the orders had come down to keep that number down. So we probably got off a little lighter than would be normal. So I was assigned to the barracks, which was since my last name begins with B, we were at the end of the street closest to the mess hall and the company headquarters, and I was on the second floor, which was covered with ketchup red linoleum, and we had steel bunk beds placed end to end around the perimeter of this big open bay. The center of the bay, where there weren't any bunks, was mainly used for sweeping and mopping. And I had I was on the lower bunk, and every morning we'd get up and we'd go in and juggle for space at the sinks and in the toilets, and then to get dressed and make up our bunk and then go out to our morning activities. And while we were out, somebody would come through, and if they didn't like the way a bunk was made, they'd take the mattress and flip it onto the floor. And then when we came back at lunch, the offending party would find all of his bedding on the floor and have to put it back together. Well, they did that to me once. And I came back at lunch and I spent 10 or 15 minutes getting everything in place and no wrinkles and stretched tight. And then I realized that as nice as it looked, I was going to have to tear it up that night to go to bed and then try to do it again in the morning when we were all rushed for time. So I waited till lights out that night. I took my pillow and I crawled underneath the bunk and slept on the floor. Next morning, I put my pillow back in place, went outside with everybody else. It passed inspection, and I came back and said, well, why should I reinvent the wheel every morning? I'll just spend the next 7 weeks on the floor. We were tired enough anyway, it didn't matter. But that didn't work out because the fellow my bunkmate was an enlistee. Now, I know the popular misconception is that draftees cause all the problems in the military. And to be sure, we ask the most questions and we would make the most complaints. But by and large, draftees were not disappointed or disillusioned by military life. Enlistees had come in with higher expectations. And occasionally these would have collide with reality in a heartbreaking fashion. And that happened to the fellow on the upper bunk. So he was one of the 6 who deserted. That left his bunk empty with a folded mattress on top. So I got off the floor, and every night I go flip open his mattress, sleep on the top bunk on the bare mattress, and then go out in the morning. That was not my worst problem, though, because every meal we would fall out into the company street, and then we would go one by one through the horizontal ladder, which is like a hand-over-hand thing, and you get to the end and we run up to get in line at the chow hall. Well, now, I can't say that I'd never done physical labor in my life, because I had, but I'd never done much. And the year before I was drafted, I hadn't done any at all. See, I'd been working in a Wall Street bank. You probably thought I was a hippie, right? But no, I'd been working in a Wall Street bank, and I had all the upper body strength required of a bank clerk. And so I couldn't get to the end of the ladder. But that didn't bother me, because I knew that with exercise and practice that would come. What did bother me is that my hands were kind of soft. And grabbing those steel pipes and twisting as you swung from one to the other, after about a week, I had blisters across the palm side of my knuckles on both hands. And a day or so after that, I had ripped those blisters off, and I had open sores on both hands. That hurt. So I went to my drill sergeant. You remember the drill sergeant who didn't like me? And I showed him my hands. It was plain to see. And I said, could I be excused from the ladder until these things heal? Because tearing them up every day is not going to make it better. And he said, well, it sounds like a personal problem and nothing I have to deal with. So that left me with a dilemma. And then I realized something that I had overlooked, and that is when we fell into formation before each meal, and before we went on the ladder, the sergeant would ask, is there anybody who wants to help serve in the kitchen? And nobody ever volunteered, because it meant losing about a half hour of your meal break. But now I realized if I did that, I wouldn't have to do the other. So I started volunteering 3 meals a day, every day, for about 3 weeks. And the hands got better. And we had our various adventures here and there and ups and downs, until now we would get about the 6th week of the 8 weeks of training, and my name came up on the duty roster. Now, every night somebody had to sit in the company headquarters by the company telephone in case of emergency, and it rotated different people every time. Now, my turn came up, and after supper, I reported in to see whatever it was I had to sit by the phone, and my drill sergeant was in there. And he surprised me a little bit. Not that he was surprised that he was there, but that he was sitting there with his shirt off, wearing a tank top, and with his feet up on the desk. And I had never seen him in a casual position like that or off duty. As a matter of fact, the drill sergeants took particular pride in their appearance. They had the glossiest, shiniest boots and the crispest uniforms. We even had one sergeant in the company who, if he had to sit down during the day, would go back to his room and change his pants so none of the creases would be broken. So that was the kind of, and here this guy is sitting there with his feet up and his shirt off. And he actually, to give him credit, he actually tried to make a normal human conversation with me. The only problem was he didn't know what to say to a freak like me, and I didn't know how to relate to him. So we spent about 30 seconds or so with where are you from and what did you do there, and then just lapsed into silence. And after a few minutes, he turned on the little black and white portable TV they kept, and I reached in the cargo pocket of my fatigues and pulled out the book I was reading. The book was the Life of Mahatma Gandhi. And it wasn't a very exciting book, but I'd bought it because by that point I had a reputation to uphold. And, and also I thought it would annoy the lifers. So I had the book. And we got through there. But I think the sergeant had hoped that he would be able to make some connection with me or something. And he'd been a little upset. He may be thinking that I had rejected his overtures or whatever it was. The point was, neither one of us had the communication skills to bridge that gap. But in the morning, when we were milling around before we got into formation, he called me over and said, "Let me see that book you were reading." So I reached in my pocket and I handed him the book. He took the book, he ripped it in half and handed it back to me. Well, I took the two halves, I walked over to the trash can and dropped them in, which probably wasn't the reaction he was looking for. So then when we got in formation, he announced to everybody, he said that I had been holding back the company because I was unable to get to the end of the horizontal ladder. Now, I wasn't the only one unable to, but apparently I was the one that was holding back the company. And he said, I think he could do it if he were properly motivated. So he decided what he would do is take other members of the platoon and have them lie down underneath the ladder on their backs, side by side. And he said, now if you fall down, you're going to fall on one of your buddies. So get over there and do it. I thought that was fairly dangerous because you could really hurt somebody like that. But I didn't see much of a way out. So I tried to figure out some kind of last minute strategy. And the only thing I could think of was maybe if I could get my body moving enough momentum, I could overcome the lack of muscle strength that I'd lost by being in the kitchen and gaining 10 pounds eating snacks. And so I thought it's a poor solution, but it's the only thing I've got. So I got up there and I looked and I jumped and I start swinging and whoa, this way and that way and going. What I didn't know, because I'm watching my hands, is that the sergeant had also taken a place underneath the ladder. Except because he didn't want to get his uniform dirty, he didn't lie down. He sat up. And I'm swinging about halfway through, like crazy, and I feel my boot hit something. And I didn't know, I was trying to think, was there a pole there I hadn't noticed or something? And I hear some snickers and laughter and whatnot. But I was too fixed on trying to get to the end, and I almost made it. My hands finally gave out, and I tried to fall as lightly as possible. I was thinking happy thoughts like Peter Pan and Tinkerbell and like that. Fortunately, the guy I landed on was one of the most fit people we had. I mean, he could have been on a recruiting poster. He was a strong guy, and I apologized to him profusely, but I could tell from the expression on his face he wasn't happy with any of this. And but he did say that he wasn't hurt and he was okay, and he didn't blame me for anything. And that's when I found out that I had earned a mention in the unwritten annals of military history because I am the only basic trainee that I know of who ever kicked his drill sergeant in the head and got away with it.